It's poverty.
It's crime.
Unemployment.
Corruption.
Accountability.
The energy crisis.
Inflation. We are worried.
That South Africa has myriad problems on all fronts is a given. But the time has come for us to look for real solutions. I'm Jeremy Maggs, and this Moneyweb podcast will discuss those solutions on how South Africans can solve problems by having tough conversations and drawing on the insights of South Africa's top business leaders. Welcome to Fix SA. I'm Jeremy Maggs, and today Dr. Andrew Golding, the Chief Executive Officer at Pam Golding Properties, and in this episode, among other issues, strategies to increase affordable housing options and attract more investment. I also want to touch on the pivotal role of urban development in revitalizing the economy, as well as integrating sustainability into property development for mutual economic and environmental benefit. Dr. Andrew Golding, a very warm welcome to the program. Let's start with this. What needs fixing in South Africa?
Thanks for having me on the show, Jeremy. So I think that both in South Africa and globally, there's a consistent housing shortage. And if we could put strategies and policies in place that would look to address that, it would have a compoundingly positive effect on many aspects of society, which in my mind, from a South African perspective, need fixing. So housing, I think, can provide a really significant leg up to that at all areas, all segments of the market. And in the process, we can look to create improvements in job creation, education, virtually every aspect of society. So housing to me is critical and central. And obviously within South Africa, we have this amazing opportunity, but yet also overwhelming challenge around informal settlements and how to address that.
Andrew Golding, do we have the policy and that it's just badly implemented, or do we have insufficient policy that should be better implemented?
So I think the wording of the policy reflects a will to fix these issues, but the implementation is sadly lacking. And whether that's a function of political will or, in fact, the need for better policy is, I think, debatable.
Have we not reached a point in South Africa where the backlog for decent housing is now so big that it's almost an insurmountable gap? Or is this something that could be leapfrogged quickly, do you think?
No, I think it can be leapfrogged. And I think, again, we're not that different to many other countries in the world from that perspective. There is a massive housing backlog virtually everywhere. But I do think that there can be compounding strategies put in place which can really give a significant leap forward to this. One's just got to think of the opportunity around providing title to in informal settlements in a way that is safe and secure from the point of view of title. There's a lot of work being done in this space, but it's been spoken about for many, many years, and actually nothing really significant has happened.
So how do you improve that then?
Well, I think there's some very interesting innovations that are being spoken about, which are perhaps unconventional and which look to provide effectively security of tenure through means other than that which is conventionally considered through the deeds office. And so that could include, in particular, innovations around data and data analytics. And so if there, and including the community involvement. So if it can be universally accepted that a person has lived in a property for a long period of time, that nobody disagrees with that, and provided the landowner, which in many instances is the government, is prepared to accept that that person is the de facto landowner, then title can be transferred in spite of the fact that it isn't done in a conventional way. And that's potentially a very exciting innovation to enable people to get some kind of title, which then enables them to get onto the ladder, to be able to be mortgaged and fundamentally improve the wealth creation opportunities for hundreds of thousands of people.
It's not just about access, but it's also about the right to dignity, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a fundamental part of the Constitution, and I think one that over the last 30 years or so, we haven't managed to really move forward in any significant way from the point of view of ownership in those informal settlements, which is possible, I think.
So beyond that argument, Andrew Golding, how do you make it easier for people in South Africa at perhaps a lower and middle level of the property market to access finance easier? Because as we've both agreed now, if one has the dignity and one is in the market, that goes a long way to fixing problems in this country, because a roof over the head takes care of so many fundamentals.
Yeah, so I think it is a multi-pronged approach. It certainly starts with government and policies and regulations. There's unquestionably a question around taxation and tax incentives and subsidies, which can help. There's the notion of public-private partnerships, a range of innovations around financing, rent to buy, and other innovations which can use technology. Social housing programs. I think all of these combined can make a difference in an increasing way, which allows people just to move up the ladder wherever they are in the property ladder to ultimately create a more broad-based property ownership environment in the country. Give me a sense of how those public-private partnerships in your mind would look, because often there is a willingness and an expression of interest, but there's also a disconnect in the way in which it's done. How do you coalesce thinking on both sides of the equation to make sure that you achieve some sort of success? Yeah, so I think it is a challenge, because you're asking, on the one hand, a government to think like an entrepreneur or in a more capitalistic way. And at the same time, from a private partnership perspective, one is looking to make a profit. And so that is always the challenge around trying to find a meeting of minds, where in many instances, the government is the landowner and the developer is the private individual who's looking to have a sustainable and economically profitable business. So it is possible. It has been done in many cases, but I think that is potentially the unlock, because the one thing that the country does have is a lot of land, and much of it is in the hands of the government. So that to me represents an optimistic opportunity around trying to create significant numbers of housing in particularly the affordable sector and the sector just above that. Andrew Golding, we are recording this podcast on the day that President Ramaphosa is sworn in at the Union buildings, and thereafter comes the decision to put together a cabinet in a government of national unity. One of those key jobs is going to be the Minister of Housing. Often it is a portfolio that has been shunted to the margins. All we ever hear is about the chronic backlog, but little more. In this new era that we're starting to move in now, how do you recalibrate the housing agenda in South Africa to make sure that you get on the road to the fix? Herein lies a clean slate. What would the new priorities be for whichever person occupies that all-important portfolio? And I think perhaps the most important thing in that respect is to firstly acknowledge that it is an important portfolio and not a junior ministry. Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. Is that there are so many competing priorities that the country does face, and obviously I'm talking to my own book here, but I do think that if one can get some momentum within the portfolio of housing to address the backlog in a meaningful way, that is going to have such a positive knock-on effect in so many different parts of life in South Africa. That from my perspective, I would prioritize it in terms of other equally important, but I think the effect that this significant portfolio can have is so far-reaching in terms of job creation, in particular, many other aspects of life which the property industry supports and which can help the country move forward. So I think there is a challenge. I'm optimistic in terms of the new government of national unity and perhaps an ability to reprioritize some of these issues. which perhaps have been less prioritized in the past
Andrew
for political reasons.
Andrew Golding, let me pivot the conversation now away from affordable housing. It's axiomatic that if there is more foreign investment into a country, it is going to enable a fixing of the economy. In your opinion, how does South Africa start to attract more foreign investment into this country, and particularly into the sector where you're closely aligned to, in other words, the property market?
So I think the key word is certainty. I think if we can provide political stability, policy certainty, that will go a long way to enabling foreign investment to feel comfortable to invest in the country. I think there is a huge appetite. South Africa has so many advantages right now in terms of the state of the global economy and the state of the world generally. We're seeing a huge appetite, but in the face of uncertainty, that appetite diminishes. So if that could be created, I think that would be an enormous step forward. Linked to that is obviously economic stability. And so I think in terms of getting the economy going, that is an important factor. I think that the notion of infrastructure development is always key. And so if there are signs of significant infrastructure development, that will give foreign investors a level of confidence. I think the legal and regulatory environment is something that gives investors already a sense of comfort, and hopefully that won't change. And then I think the notion of marketing, where I think the country needs to market itself continuously and better, and where that will then provide also an opportunity for foreigners to invest and create much needed foreign direct investment in a significant way.
I want to push you a little further on one aspect that you've just raised. Andrew, if I had 100 Rand for every time a guest mentioned the words policy certainty to me, I'd be able to buy one of those properties that you're probably selling in Camps Bay today. So what do you mean by policy certainty? It's become such a catch-all for everything. What would you like to see in that respect?
I think the notion of the entrenchment of property rights, and so no ambiguity at all about that, and the process which ensures that there are clear and consistent policies in respect of foreign investment specifically. Foreigners, if they're going to invest in the country, they need to know exactly what it is they're investing in. And if they need or want to get their money out, they need to feel comfortable that they can do that. So those are two, for me, very clear guidelines that need to be unambiguous and have certainty. Because I think once that is in place, then the quantity of foreign direct investment that we will be able to attract will make a big difference to many parts of the country, but in particular the property industry.
Are you seeing any movement in that respect? Anything that gives you any degree of encouragement?
So there has been significant foreign direct investment actually through COVID and post-COVID. But when I say significant, in real terms, it's a small amount. And so a lot of it is off domestic residential purchases. That makes up probably 0.7% of the total number of sales in the country at any one time. So it's a relatively small number of people. In terms of value, it's also relatively small when compared to the rest of the industry. So the industry is basically a local industry with some foreign direct investment. In certain parts of the country, you mentioned Camps Bay, as an example, the number would be a bit higher than that, but it's still not a massive number. And the opportunity that South Africa offers in terms of its attractiveness when compared to other parts of the world is an enormous opportunity. And I think if there was political certainty around foreign direct investment and the other things I've mentioned, I really do think the floodgates could open, and that could be a really significant moment in terms of getting that investment in.
Andrew, I'm assuming as we're having this conversation, you're probably in Cape Town today. I'm sitting in Johannesburg, and as I look out, and I guess as you look out, you will see a lot of unevenness as far as urban development is concerned. I know when I visit Cape Town, there are magnificent parts of the city, and there are other parts that are shameful, and exactly the same here in Johannesburg. In terms of fixing South Africa and perhaps stretching the curtain a little bit, how do you improve urban development thinking to make sure that it can revitalize South Africa's economy? In other words, spreading the love a little further.
Yeah, so I think the policies of the last a decade at least, have certainly looked to promote a reduction of the obvious inequality that does exist. And so I think that those policies are from a framework perspective in place, but again, the practical application of that clearly hasn't had much of an effect. So I think one's got to look at housing affordability. And so again, that taps into this question of the notion of affordable housing and all the other segments as you go up the ladder. To create a climate of speculative investment, I think in areas which have been underdeveloped and provide incentives for those would be an idea that I think could allow areas that have been underdeveloped to begin to become developed. I think the notion of gentrification of inner city suburbs is already well underway, and that process is happening. But all of it needs to be underpinned by, I think, a government policy and an investment philosophy, which looks to ensure that these areas of inequality begin to get equalized by creating different approaches to how one views areas which are clearly very unequal and which need to be more normalized. So the notion of buffer zones, I think, is one that is beginning to get some traction, where one can easily and completely satisfactorily have an affordable housing development unit right next to a house that is perhaps worth significantly more than that affordable housing unit, and where those communities can coexist very well.
That's a hard sell, though. I've seen that egalitarian type of town planning applied certainly in India and certainly in Botswana, but it would be surely a hard sell in South Africa.
It's a hard sell in terms of its philosophy, but there are examples of where it has worked. So I think, again, if there is the political will and particularly from the point of view of creating an environment for public-private partnerships or even just private individuals to go into that kind of business and develop those kinds of opportunities, it can work. And so I'm optimistic that those examples can begin to become more frequent, and the individuals will see that, in fact, it is possible to have that kind of mixed use across the various segments in the housing market.
And leading on from that mixed use debate, I would imagine, is the whole notion of sustainability. South Africa is behind the curve when it comes to CO2 emission management and generally the green debate. I think we might be in broad agreement as far as that is concerned. So how then do you think that sustainability should be better integrated into property development to benefit the economy? Therein lies the fix, and also therein lies improvement to the environment, which is going to improve perception as far as South Africa is concerned.
So I think you're correct in saying we are behind the curve. There's no doubt about that. But the trend in terms of residential housing is unquestionably towards the notion of sustainability. So that it would include green building certification being increasingly frequent. The notion of energy efficiency in homes and properties generally, an awareness around water conservation, material selection, site selection and land use, community involvement, all of these things have an impact on the notion of sustainability. And obviously that then leads into additional components like the long-term maintenance of sustainable buildings. And then ultimately where financial incentives can be put in place around regulation and where we follow where the rest of the world has certainly been going in terms of sustainability. So I do think it is happening. It's happening at a slower pace than perhaps the rest of the world, but it certainly is a trend that we are seeing, and one where we are seeing pricing differentials start to take place between homes that have a focus on sustainability versus homes that are not focused on this kind of thing. So that is also going to play itself out in economic terms.
And all of that
of resale value.
And all of that, of course, is going to be aided by better technology. You've mentioned that already. How do you think technology can be better leveraged to enhance the property market, drive economic growth, and therefore, back to the premise of this conversation, to fix things?
So I think if there's one area where we're, from a property industry perspective, we're able to catapult ourselves into parity with other parts of the world, I think it is in the technology world, because we're able to access that technology. So I think there are a number of different areas where technology can play a very significant role. I think the first one would be around data analytics and our ability to access really significant and accurate data. So I alluded to the notion of informal settlements and how perhaps data can play a role in providing security of tenure in an unconventional way. The whole question of blockchain technology and its ability to provide security of tenure might also be another one. The whole notion of AI and how that's going to play itself out in terms of property management and in the property industry, I think is still in its infancy. But there's no question that it's going to play a role. And so there's no doubt in my mind that technology, and through data in particular, will allow us to benefit from being able to access this kind of data and using it in an intelligent way. So let me one's just got to think of the remote work trend and how technology there has transformed the way we live and the way we work, to see the potential that could have going into the future.
So, Andrew Golding, let me start winding this conversation up. You've thrown a lot of very important and very good ideas on the table. Let me reference my favorite cliche that you can't manage any progress unless you can measure it. So in terms of fixing South Africa and some of the ideas that you've put forward, what, in your opinion, would be a short-term measurement or indication of a sign that we are starting to improve things?
Probably the ability to make some meaningful progress in terms of providing a solution for title to be transferred into in the informal sector. I think that if that was able to be created, it would be such a seed change in the land ownership environment in South Africa that it would have a massive effect.
Dr. Andrew Golding, let me end with this question then. You've put a lot of good ideas on the table. Are you confident, again, as we record this conversation, as we herald in a new dispensation into South Africa, are you confident broadly that we can be fixed in this country sooner rather than later?
Yeah, Jeremy, I think that the week post the election was a very nervy time, and I think there was a lot of concern that the country, may have been trending towards a 5-year cycle, which was going to be a negative one. But I think what has panned out has left many people, including me, very optimistic about the government of national unity, its potentially pro-business approach. And therefore, I am optimistic. I think one of the things that is key to getting the country going again is economic growth, and hopefully this new government is going to promote that, and that will have a positive effect on the economy generally, but also the housing market, which desperately needs economic growth for its sustainability.
Dr. Andrew Golding, Chief Executive Officer at the Pam Golding Group, Pam Golding Properties, thank you very much for joining me on this edition of Fix SA on Moneyweb. Thanks for listening to this Fix SA podcast. For more episodes posted every second Friday, go to moneyweb.co.za, the Moneyweb app, Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or follow Moneyweb News on social media for more updates. Moneyweb, your trusted source for business and investment insights.